If you're trying to find a job right now, you've probably noticed that there aren't many jobs out there. The job market for entry-level positions always slows down after the holidays. On this episode, I'm going to talk a little about this dry period in the job market, and I will tell you where you will be able to find jobs right now and what you can do to prepare yourself for when the job market picks back up. It is the week of January 12th through the 16th, and you're watching the QC Step Podcast. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the QC Step Podcast. I'm Corey Finneran. A lot of you were out of school some days last week because of the weather. If you haven't seen it yet, last week's episode was an interview that I did with Kirk Marski from Career Cruising Quad Cities. And if you're part of our STEP program, your school has access to Career Cruising, and I would suggest watching that interview to see that some of the features that Career Cruising has will help you in your employment search and in your career. I mentioned that there was bad weather last week, and a lot of your schools were closed on various days. Last year, at about this time, I did an episode of the podcast on what to do if you're not able to get to work because of transportation issues or bad weather. That was episode number 47, and you can find that at qcstep.com/winter weather. And that would be a good episode to watch right now because, we're just kind of starting the winter, and surely we're going to have some more bad weather, and it may impact your ability to get to work. So I would suggest watching that episode so you know what to do in case your car doesn't start. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you're trying to find a job, I'm sure that you've noticed that there aren't many businesses hiring entry-level positions for high school students right now. Business slows down for the majority of industries this time of year. It's cold, and people just aren't going out into public as much as they do in the warmer months, so everything just kind of slows down. So not only has business slowed down, which means that businesses aren't hiring, but on top of that, the people that were working temporary seasonal jobs, they're now out of work. And so competition is tougher for the jobs that are available. And this is not a good combination, especially if you don't have a lot of work experience. In situations like we're in right now, businesses can be pretty picky about who they hire, and your competition is probably people that have more experience and they're more qualified for the positions that you're applying for. So that makes this situation sound pretty bleak, doesn't it? Well, it doesn't have to be. The truth is, there are some businesses in certain industries that do hire this time of year. The first would be fast food restaurants. The fast food industry has a high turnover, which means employees quit or get fired frequently. High turnover is common in a lot of industries that have a lot of entry-level positions. Employees leaving for various reasons means that they need to replace those workers, and this happens to be a year-round thing in fast food. So you can pretty much assume that the fast food restaurants like McDonald's, Hardee's, Wendy's, Burger King, Taco Bell, and all the others, they're pretty much hiring all of the time. And that's why I don't include them very often in the job leads on qcstep.com. I think it's safe to assume that they're hiring all of the time. With these fast food restaurants, I would suggest going in and asking if they're hiring rather than calling them. A lot of times they're busy, and you're probably just going to get a better answer if you go into the restaurant. A lot of the time they're going to tell you that they're not hiring, but they are accepting applications. And what that means is that they're not hiring right then, but they will take your application. And if that's what they tell you, I would suggest filling out the application. Maybe they're not hiring right now, But let's say next week, they may have 2 people that quit and another person that gets fired, and suddenly they have positions that they need to fill. And so they're not going to advertise that they're hiring. Instead, they're going to go to the stack of applications that they have and grab the ones that are most qualified they have on file, and they're going to start calling for interviews. So now let's go over some things that you can do during this slow hiring period to help you get prepared for the application and the interview process when things start to pick up in March and April. There are things that you can do to get organized, and that will give you a better chance of being offered a position when things do pick back up. The first thing that I would suggest, and you hear me say this all of the time, and we even heard Kirk Marsky mention it on last week's episode, if you don't have a lot of work experience to put on your application or in a resume, do volunteer work. It's pretty easy to find volunteer work through the Davenport Volunteer Connection if you live in the Quad Cities. And I hope that here in the next month or two, I hope to have someone from that agency here on the podcast to talk about the process of getting volunteer work and everything that they offer with their agency. So I hope to have that happen here in the next month or two. But volunteering is an easy way to get some work experience, and it looks good to potential employers because it shows that you care about your community, and it shows that you're willing to give up your time to help other people. Another thing that you can do during this slow period is to create a resume. On last week's episode, Kirk talked about the resume building tool that Career Cruising has. And while having a resume isn't completely necessary, when you're applying for entry-level jobs, it can really help you stand out from other applicants to have a resume. During this slow time, you should also get organized with your master application. Get all of your work dates or the dates from your work history and line up your references. And if you're not sure what a master application is, I've talked about a master application a few times this school year here on the podcast. A master application is a generic application that you can fill out and you can use it when you're filling out real job applications. So that way you have all of your information there, and all you have to do is copy it over to a real application, whether that's a paper application or an online application. You have everything right there. You can print off a master application from our website. Just go to qcstep.com/master application. If you would like to know what else you can do to prepare for your job and your job search, then go back and watch episode number 65 of the podcast. And I'll put a link here underneath this video. And that episode is entitled 4 Tips for Preparing for Your Job Search. And another thing that you can do during this slow period of hiring is to get organized with the businesses that you want to apply with. Either on paper or in a computer document, list the businesses that you plan to apply with. Then start contacting these businesses. If they aren't hiring now, find out when they will be hiring and make notes in that document. When you call, ask to speak with the hiring manager and be sure that you write down that person's name. And then when you apply, you can write in the date that you applied on that document. When you call to check in on your application, you follow up on your application or follow up on an interview, you can write down those dates into that document. Being organized will help you a ton if you're applying with a lot of different businesses. If you've applied at 8 or 10 different businesses trying to get hired, things can get messy, and it will help you to keep the hiring manager's name straight. It will help you feel more confident throughout the process. And although there aren't a lot of positions open right now, there aren't many businesses hiring, there are things that you can do to help you land a job. First off, check with the fast food restaurants. Apply with them. Otherwise, build your resume on Career Cruising, fill out a master application, and create a document to stay organized in the job search. If you would like help with filling out a master application or building a resume or creating that document, to keep your employment search notes in, then ask your step teacher to contact Gary or Carrie. And I know that Carrie is working with some students at United Township High School this week doing some resumes on career cruising. And both Gary and Carrie would be happy to help you get ready and get more prepared for your job search. If you're not in STEP, then you can contact Gary and Carrie through me. Just email me, info@qcstep.com. You can connect with QC Step through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find links to all of those at the top of qcstep.com. And if you're filling out applications or preparing for an interview, the QC Step Facebook group is a great place to get your questions answered. I'm obviously a member of the group, and there's a few other STEP teachers that are in the group. So if you have employment questions, post them in that group, and we would be happy to help you by answering your questions. And as always, you're welcome to send in your employment questions for me to discuss on the podcast. I have a few that I'll be answering here over the next few weeks, but you can submit yours at qcstep.com. Just click on the Submit Your Employment Question icon, and that will take you to a form to fill out. Thanks for downloading this week's episode, and I will be back next week with another episode of the QC Step Podcast.